The colored circles on this animation show where earthquakes have occurred in the last 40 years in California and all over the world. Most of the quakes occur along fault lines. These fault lines are the boundaries where two plates come together. The San Andreas Fault is the boundary between the North American Plate and the Pacific Plate. The Earth's crust is cracked into about 20 plates. These plates are on the move. Data from satellites proves that some of the ground stations are moving about 40 millimeters a year, the speed at which our fingernails grow. That doesn't sound like very much, but over millions of years, the distances are vast. In fact, one theory suggests that 250 million years ago, the Earth would have looked something like this, and during that time, the plates slowly moved to their present position.
What this means is that Los Angeles eventually, millions of years from now, will be far to the north of San Francisco, and their climate probably will be much worse than ours is in San Francisco today.
The San Andreas Fault runs through this lake and on through the valley.
Well, we're standing here in a field southeast of San Francisco, and it may look like an ordinary field, but actually we're standing on the San Andreas Fault. I've got one foot on the North American Plate, another foot on the Pacific Plate. In 1906, there was a very large earthquake that nearly devastated San Francisco. If I had been standing here and my foot had been straddled like this, I would have moved 9 feet, a little less than 3 meters. How do we know the ground moved here in 1906? Well, this fence, which was constructed before the earthquake, was constructed in a straight line that came right through where I'm standing. After the earthquake, the scientists that came out to study this area, and they found that the fence posts on this side of the fault had moved nearly 3 meters during the earthquake. When an earthquake happens, it's really the result of movement between two tectonic plates. Here we have the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate, which are moving past each other in a sideways fashion like this. Now down at depth, these plates are moving all the time, but right at the fault, they're locked on the surface. And it's not unlike what happens when I start to bend this stick. As I continually stress it, eventually it will snap.
The plates at the San Andreas Fault constantly slide sideways deep down in the Earth. In 1906, under the strain, the surface of the Earth suddenly snapped.
When the fault breaks, the energy from that radiates out through the Earth in waves, and it's those waves passing under your feet that you feel as the shaking during an earthquake. The San Andreas Fault in this area is locked. It hasn't budged since 1906, and that is very worrying because the plates keep on moving. We know this motion is happening at depth, and eventually the fault will have to catch up. And when it does, it's going to move very abruptly, and it's going to produce a very large earthquake, perhaps a 7.5 or larger magnitude earthquake.